Yeah, I think we are live now. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. A quick usual check if you can let us know that you can see and hear us in the chat box. Someone from the audience? Sandeep, as usual. Perfect. Thank you, Sandeep. Let me just start the YouTube and Facebook live stream and we'll just start in few seconds. Okay, so it's 5 p.m. IST and we're good to start. So, thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on from where you're joining. We have yet another Tribecast webinar session today, and we have two amazing engineers from Sauce Labs who will brief us about their thoughts on how you can complete your QA strategy using a good balance between manual testing and automation. Before that, in case anyone is completely new to the test tribe, which I find it would be probably rare, but just a quick intro. We are a community which started out of India like 3 years back, and we recently completed 3 years on 11th of January, and it was quite a celebration and milestone for us. So while we do a lot of these events, we have so far done 115 plus events online and offline. Uh, Events is one category, and then there is an online community where a lot of collaboration happens and real interactions happen there. So in case you are not yet there, I think Josh Lee, my co-host, he'll drop a link to join the community. In case you are not there yet, please join. Uh, on that note, starting with today's webinar, so we have Alistair Heys and we have Min Yang. So Alistair works as a director product insights at Sauce Labs, and Min, who is a solution engineer working at Sauce Labs. So obviously they'll introduce themselves at depth, and without taking any further time, I'll hand it over to Alistair. If you are ready, you can start.
Yes, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Good morning, good evening, good night to everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us this platform to be able to talk a little bit about how we view manual testing fitting into the larger testing plan. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen and
Quick
get
heads up,
started.
Alistair, we can't see you on the video. I'm not sure if that's only me, but yeah.
Oh, okay. I can see myself on the video. Maybe if someone can pop in the chat if they're able to see me. Okay, so Sahil says we can see.
Okay, perfect.
Great, and then my screen should also be up now if people can see that. Great.
Yep.
Okay. So doing pretty well to start. Great. So when we also talk, we thought it'd be really interesting to talk about a little bit about Sauce Labs, a little bit about what we do, and how we view the world with manual testing. So and how that fits into the automation picture. So to give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to talk about, I'll quickly introduce myself. We're going to talk about Sauce Labs, and then we're going to get into why manual testing is important. Look at some examples that we see our clients do a lot in terms of how they use live testing to complement and supplement their automation efforts. And then we're gonna hand over to Min to give a full product demonstration on what are some of the capabilities that we have available, as well as leave plenty of time for Q&A. So I believe on the platform you can submit questions, and then the team at Test Tribes are gonna give it a go to kind of filter those down and get to the ones that we really want to answer. We should have plenty of time to answer as many as possible though, and we can always follow up offline after the presentation if there are outstanding questions that people want answered. So a little bit of background about me to start. I'm, as was said, Alistair Heys, Director of Product for Insights. I've worked for about the last 10 years in technology for various companies. I used to work for a point of sale company But since joining Source Labs, I look after primarily our insights product offering, as well as our live testing product offering. And then I work internally with our data and data science teams to make sure that we run our businesses efficiently, as well as provide sometimes custom information and custom analysis to some of our customers so they can understand what's going on in their automation suites a little bit better. Yumin has been has joined Source. He's based out of our European offices and is our solution engineer who helps customers along their testing journey by advising and developing plans and strategies with them, making sure that they can be successful in their endeavors. So then when we look at Source Labs, and one thing we try and focus on is not that we that we deliver X, Y, or Z. So we do deliver a number of different things, including virtual machines to test on. We provide Selenium and Appium automation. Recently, we just released Cypress automation, so you can test Cypress tests at scale, as well as Playwright. But what we really try and focus on is the impact to our customers, and in doing so, what our core purpose is try and create a world of digital confidence. So it'd be a completely reasonable question to ask, what is digital confidence and why do we think it's so important? So not that recently, although we think it's still relevant, Gartner did a CEO survey, which looked at a number of CEOs, and 47% of them said, I'm under a lot of pressure from my board to be able to make progress in our digital transformation or on our digital offering. And 56% of them also said that not only am I under pressure to do it, but every time we do it, or we see actual profits improve too. So one example that comes up is in 2019, there was a fall of 6.2% in North America for Black Friday brick and mortar retail sales, but at the same time, with that 6.2% decrease, there was a 14% increase in digital traffic. Now, that doesn't maybe seem like that's a ton, but when we look at the overall numbers, just in North America alone, that equates to $7.2 billion increase total in online sales. So you can imagine there's a major shift towards digital in real terms and not just experiences. Well, one other interesting fact that came out of that analysis was that 56% of those transactions took place on a smartphone. So it's overwhelmingly heading in the direction that more and more mobile becomes more and more important. Not to take away from desktop browser, because as we all know, that's important too. It's just when we start looking at sales and how important the digital experience is on mobile, it's becoming more and more critical every day. So really what happens now is that we view that the app or website application becomes the actual value proposition. One story I like to tell is in California, there was a billboard that came up on Highway 101 that was all it was Wells Fargo's app. Nothing about what it can do, but just to illustrate, we have an app. This is how important it is. And with the value proposition being of a lot of companies moving more and more towards their digital experience for customers, we think it's important to provide the right set of tools so that those can be easily monitored and improved, and we can build good experiences and products. So it's not just good enough anymore to be able to just build an app that functions, but the experience itself really needs to be good. The function needs to perform as intended, but it needs to happen that this happens before a customer gets to it. And for a lot of industries, confidence is especially important in that they want to be able to know they can rely on the app. So we see a lot with our customers in banking and healthcare. that it's absolutely critical that they have a truly flawless experience to provide the level of confidence that customers are looking for. So when we go back to so a couple of other things to bear in mind that really drives this home for me was that McKinsey and Company did a study, and they determined that 25% of customers will abandon an app after just one bad experience. Harvard managed to quantify it by looking at Harvard Business Review managed to quantify it by looking at customers and how much they spend based on their bad experiences, and found that there's a 140% increase in spending versus people who have people who have a good experience spend 140% more than customers who have a bad experience. As well as Qualtrics, is a large customer surveying product and tool, found that 41% of customers decrease their spending or stop spending altogether after a bad experience. So again, it's just to hit home the point of how critical it is to provide really good experiences and really good experiences right at the start, all the way through the customer journey and lifetime. So then when we look at it in real terms as well, was Forrester found that even a 1-point score in a CX index score, which is a proprietary score they have, but if we look at based on their scoring, they found that a 1% or 1 point improvement can equate to real dollars. And when you look at the size and customer base of a lot of these industries, it makes a huge difference. So we find the stat really interesting. So even in direct banks, if you have a slight improvement, you end up with a revenue increase of $8.20, but at 3 million users, it ends up being $25 million. All the way up to, auto manufacturers on the mass market, can have an incremental increase of 58.5 or $58.51. When you scale that out to 18 million users, it suddenly becomes $1.1 billion. So I think it's a really interesting way to think about it. And then obviously all of us would only be a small segment of this, but it really starts adding up and really affects the bottom line of any given business. So the question often comes up to us, how does manual testing fit in? So Source Lab started as essentially a Selenium grid about 10 years ago. One of the co-founders of Selenium started Source because he noticed there's a really big problem to solve, which is how do I scale Selenium testing? So we started building the various pieces of infrastructure needed to do that. Now, as we've developed, we've added mobile testing, we've added mobile virtual testing, real devices. We're in the process of adding visual testing, so capturing DOM snapshots and comparing them to each other. We're in the process of adding API testing, but really the core theme here is that manual is still a large part of what we do. So with all the automation in the world, you still need someone to be able to validate different ideas, validate business logic, things like that. So when we look at how we advise companies, it's never this one magic silver bullet will solve everything. We advise companies, and I think the market in general has been shifting left. So moving towards development. Closer and closer to the developer. So unit tests to integration tests to end-to-end tests, looking at different frameworks. Obviously, in the last 10 years or last 5 years, Android and Apple have made, so I suppose Google and Apple have made huge strides in providing developers with tools to be able to effectively build their apps and test them. With the way most browsers are becoming Chromium-based, it's really interesting too, because it gives an opportunity to be able to test a lot more effectively at a developer level. Having said that, we also are spending a lot of time talking to our customers about how with this shift left, they're actually also trying to shift right. And by shifting right, we mean moving closer and closer to the end user. So when one thinks about shifting right, what more and more customers are doing is trying to incorporate better and better signal from their user base into their testing efforts and into their quality efforts to to really understand what is going well and what isn't going well. So I think, as companies start shifting left and right, maybe in different orders, they have to have a holistic view on their overall testing strategy. And what we find is that companies are doing this. So if I went and grabbed from our BI tool the top largest 500 customers, so largest 500 customers by total number of jobs run for the week from the 20th to the 26th of January, because I was interested when I was coming up to do this chat. I was like, I actually wonder, like, at what volume do a lot of our large customers manually test at? Now, a lot of our customers are what we would say are like purely automation, but I went in and I found 92.7% of the largest 500 customers all do manual testing on our platform, which I thought is really, really interesting. And I think a reason for that is that, with the best planning and the best automation in the world, there's still gaps. And as you find those gaps, the shortest path to being able to fill them or understand them is often through manual efforts. So when we talk to customers and when we look at how they generally complete their testing strategy, they often complement and supplement it with manual testing. So when we look at complementing it, it'll be to sometimes provide more difficult use cases or functions they're trying to test. Often it will be they get feedback from support or an internal business unit that they try and then figure out if there is something going on there. And then there's also the cases where they'll supplement automation from manual as they're possibly migrating to automation, or as they think it actually provides more value in certain cases. So one customer I spoke to was having major issues with understanding why their app wasn't performing. So they had an app that was a native app for Android that spoke to a set of APIs that they hosted, and they really couldn't get to the bottom of why the app wasn't performing. So for a while, they supplemented the automated testing. They got a bunch of manual testers in to set up various tools on the devices themselves, monitor the API traffic, and then use that to help determine what was going on in the app and what was going wrong. And they found that very effective. So as the development shifting left, we find that customers are finding it easier and easier to do functional testing and functional validation, which is good, because we find it also actually frees up a lot of time for QA teams to start focusing on, instead of just having to focus all their time on making sure that the individual piece or function or feature works. They can start shifting their focus to where can I find and validate that there's business value and that the business value is being delivered to the customers. Obviously, business value is a pretty general term, but really focusing on working with various stakeholders to understand where the users get value from the system and how they can test to make sure that is being delivered. And what we find too is that our customers that we would think of as being very successful, so they test frequently, they can deliver really rapidly, they can go from coding to production really quickly. I think all of them have manual testing efforts. It's not a thing that is just going to go away. So I thought it'd be good to talk about a couple of things that are that become very useful for manual testing. Obviously, exploratory testing is a huge one. You can normally pretty quickly identify UX issues or major UX issues, often a lot quicker than any sort of automation can. We're able to, as humans, process a lot of information really quickly, especially when it comes to visual discrepancies. Sometimes it's easier to validate something manually than in an automated fashion, especially depending on the application. So depending on the types of elements and things like that, obviously you've got just recreating bugs, looking at test conditions that are subject to change. So if something's being tested or developed rapidly, often it's not worth automating if you know you're going to change it a lot over the next little while. And then, a lot of the time there's either accessibility or security components that aren't easily automated, or the functions aren't available to automate them. So then we thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about what we find useful for real devices versus virtual devices versus virtual machines. So quickly, just to talk about real devices. So we have a product offering which is a real device, or say a Samsung Galaxy S10 that sits in one of our data centers that you can connect to remotely through our application. So we call it a real device because there's really a real device sitting there in the data center that can be used, and we find these to be very accurate and useful. A virtual device is an emulator or simulator, so similar to the one that you would run on your laptop if you were doing development and you wanted to spin up a virtual environment to test something. We offer those at scale. We also offer those on a few different operating systems. So if you want to run one on Mac versus a Windows machine, things like that, so that you can get the exact thing. And then virtual machines, which is virtual desktops, Safari, Mac and Windows, a bunch of different versions, some of the legacy versions like Windows 2008, with combinations of Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and Microsoft Edge, IE, so that we offer the full capability to go across and test all the different browsers whenever you need, so that you don't have to then spend a lot of time figuring out how to get IE6 back onto your machine so that you can then test on it. So when we generally look at it, we think about using these tools a bit like where if you're shifting left and right, you want to supplement and complement your manual testing efforts and use it where appropriate. We think of the same thing as these types of resources. So they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but we think it in combination is really where it makes the most sense, where you can start picking out the pieces that you want to and using them when it makes sense. So we find real devices are really good for the later stage of the app development cycle. So once you have an app that's kind of more mature or more well understood, it's really useful to start using them on real devices. You can test out the actual interactions themselves, but more importantly than that, you can get a sense of how the app is performing on any given piece of software. How does it perform in the real world with resolution, location, and various other functions. This is also the area that we think provides the most value for when we look at trying to debug information. So you might get a report or see an error from a user, and obviously it's a challenge to sometimes get some of the devices that are available. So we think there's a lot of opportunity to have access to way more devices than you'd ever be able to have in, say, your office or for your company, and really drill down and start figuring out where the issues are. On the virtual device side, we see a lot of customers that use this hand in hand with their development teams, so that you can test on these and be able to find bugs and give them to a development team in an environment in which they can easily reproduce it. So, if you're early on in your development stage and someone's working away, but they want you to start doing functional testing, you can test on the same emulator they are or the same simulator, provide them the information with rich content, and in that way, developers can spend a lot less time trying to get set up, just be able to even reproduce the bug to then fix. The nice thing about this too is obviously there's a lower cost associated with being able to run these, which means you can do more and more of it. There's a lot available. And then finally, virtual machines. This just makes it easier to test across legacy versions, as well as then getting into real versions, being able to switch between them much more quickly, so that you're able to get a much wider coverage at a really quick speed without too much change. So when we look at a couple of examples that I pulled together that happened recently, of examples where I think it's been really interesting to watch how our clients use it, is recently Samsung released the S21. This was presumed to be a popular device. So generally when we're enabling new devices, we look and we say, what are our expectations for how popular this is going to be in the market? Generally, anytime there's an Apple release of a new iPhone, we assume that, or we presume there'd be a significant demand for that. So we make sure we do that. The example here is that by complementing your automation suite with manual, you're able to quickly get in, try out everything on the S21, find any obvious issues, and do that ahead of the release of the phone to the general public. As well as then not just finding the issues, but finding the specific issues that would happen on the S21. Then what we generally find is that new devices end up producing a number of bugs for various reasons that might not be anticipated. Depending on the manufacturer, obviously there's a wide range of differences between the different devices, but often getting devices that might have a new resolution or a new piece of hardware that's not commonly used across a large portion of their product offering can generate a number of issues for app developers and website developers. So the next example I thought that was really worth talking about is when we find an issue and using live and manual testing to supplement the information provided back to the development team. So what we find particularly on mobile and native app mobile is that often an issue might be isolated to either an OS, browser, device, brand, or resolution. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's just a functional problem, but it really helps and decreases the cycle time of the development team if we can provide something like, look, it's an OS problem, or we think it's related to OS because we've isolated it to Samsung's flavor of Android, or we don't think it's an OS problem because we've seen the same problem on iOS and Android and multiple versions of Android. Resolutions are a really interesting one because we find that a number of issues come in when people start using devices that might not have a common resolution or a common aspect ratio for that resolution. So those are the two examples I had. We're going to hand over to Yeman for a live demo, and he's going to talk a lot about how we do. But please feel free to throw any questions you might have had into the question room, and then after the demonstration, we can get to those. I'd love to have a conversation. So thank you for listening to me today, and I'm going to hand over to Yeman.
All right, cool. Thanks, Alistair. Let me share my screen. All right. Can I get a thumbs up or something if you can see the Source Labs screen? Okay, cool. Thanks. Right. Yeah. So this is going to be an interactive demo on the live platform. So I'm going to focus on some aspects, not all of them, of the platform, what the platform has to offer. We're going to mainly talk about manual testing on VMs, which I will show you in a second. We are looking at manual testing on real devices using a mobile application. And we're also going to look at some of the, let's say, more tricky or interesting functionality Source Labs has to offer to complement your manual testing on mobile devices. But let's start with VMs. And to do that, I'm clicking on cross-browser here on the left side. And this is the screen we will see. There's a lot going on the screen, but let's take a look step by step. So the first thing here is a text field for the URL. So I'll put in sourcedemo.com, which is our own publicly available demo website. At the center of the screen, I have the ability to choose one of the most used browsers in the market. That means it's Firefox, Chrome, Edge, Safari, and IE I can test on. I can choose to test on various versions, even versions still in development. For example, in case of Chrome, I can test on the latest 88, but I can also test on dev or beta, which is respectively version 89 and version 90. I can also test on different resolutions, and for this case, let's just take this resolution here. And lastly, I can choose various OS versions where I want to run the browser on, depending on what browser I have selected. In this case, various Mac versions as well as Windows. Let's stay for Windows 10. And now, when we look at the screen here, what we'll see immediately is I have the ability to test at scale, but I also have the ability to test on a wide range of different devices and configurations, meaning I can increase my test coverage exponentially. Let's start a session. And what happens now in my case here, we have a data center in Germany, and there I will now spin up a VM. As you can see, it happened already. It's a completely new VM and a completely new installed browser, so no data is left on it after you stop the session because the image will be destroyed. And what you will see here now is a standard browser. I can use right-click with my mouse to take a look at the DOM tree, for example, to inspect things. I can use my keyboard to type in. And I can log into the website, which is a demo web shop, basically. Having said that, we also offer additional functionality here on the, when we take a look at the right side. So let me zoom in a bit. And I just want to point out the invite button. So by clicking on it, what happens is we will generate a unique link to this live test session. So now let's take a step back and take a look at how the world is currently working. So most of the people are working from home, in the IT industry at least, and it's getting harder to collaborate. So with this functionality here, I, as a tester, can, for example, send this to a software developer, and they can then join my session and then watch what I'm doing in live, basically helping you to facilitate collaboration between teams. Now that I'm finished with the test, I'm going to click on Stop here on the top right, and the VM will be completely destroyed. All right. I can do the same thing, of course, on real devices, as shown here. And I can do the same thing on virtual devices, as Alistair had said. But I will come to that part roundabout again. So now let's take a look also at mobile application, which is increasingly used in the world now. And I want to start with saying I've got two apps here, two demo apps, which are also publicly available on our GitHub repository. So feel free to download and test them if you want to. I'm going to take the first one here, which is an iOS application or built for iOS. And I'm going to start it by clicking here on Choose Device. And now I have the option here to test on iOS devices. It's filtered. So I will only see iOS devices here. And the number 82 here does not represent the amount of devices I have available to myself. It means I have 82 different device configurations available for testing. And a device configuration is always the device model, an iPhone 11, for example, and its corresponding OS version, iOS 14.3, for example. Now, let's take this one here, the iPhone SE 2020, which is a private device allocated only to myself. Now, this device is physically located in Berlin, Germany. So it's a physical, real device in a data center. And what happens now is we will establish a connection to the device itself, so I can see the screen, or we can see the screen. And in the second step, we will install the app on the device. There we go. So similar to the VM you have just seen, I can interact with this device the same way I do with a browser. Meaning I can use my mouse to swipe around. I can use it to click on text fields. And I can, of course, use my keyboard to type in username. And to log in to the mobile view of the app. So now, one thing I want to foreshadow for the next minutes is, let's take a look quickly at the menu here on the left side. So remember that here there is a submenu called drawing, and that will become important. No, not important, but just remember that in this app version, the latest one, there's a drawing button. So I said I will show you some of the more interesting functionalities, and one of it is basically you can inject the location into a device. So you can do all the manual testing you normally do on the device as well, but if you want to test more sophisticated, more complex scenarios, you can do it with source labs as well. So we have geolocations in this app here. So when I click on it, okay, iOS is asking me, yes, to give the permission to use my location. And this is the location in the GPS coordinate of the device currently. It's in Berlin. And I can, well, inject another GPS location into it. This is in the US, in the Bay Area, close to San Jose. And we just use this one here. So remember 37 and minus 121 as the GPS coordinates. We will set it. And you will see that it's going to change here. There we go. Now, you might say, well, that might be a fake app. It might be, mocked. Yeah, I don't trust you, which is fair enough. That's why I'm going to open the Apple Maps here. Almost said Google Apps Maps. And we are going to take a look at what the native installed app is saying. And as you can see, this is in San Jose, but, not really clear. So what you also support here is multi gestures. That means we can do things like pinch to zoom and pinch to zoom out. So let's zoom out and we'll see, okay, this is really San Jose. The device and the native application think this is this phone is now in the US. The last point I want to show here with the app is image injection, meaning the ability to inject a fake image into the camera. And for that, I have also this functionality here in the app. I can click on yes, give permission. And here on the right side, we have the camera button. When I click on it, I can upload an image from my local file system. I've got one QR code prepared here, so it looks like this. And when we open it, and by open I mean uploading it to Source Labs, we will see, all right, we have now switched to the mobile Safari browser and it has automatically opened sourcedemo.com, the same website I showed you earlier. And yes, I can still continue to, interact with the website. Right. Having said that, now let's take a look at the Android side. So that was iOS. And remember the drawing I mentioned. Now click on settings, and I have uploaded two versions of the application. One is 2.6 and one is 2.7.1. Going to use the older version first. So I'm clicking on choose device again, and I've got various amount of Android-based phones available to me. It's 143 versus 82. So in total, we have over 200 different device configurations to test on, which is quite a lot. And you probably won't get bored or have to test on the same device for all your manual testing efforts. Let's take the Google Pixel 5, one of the latest Google phones. And similar to the iOS one, or pretty much the same, we're now connecting to the phone and the app is getting installed on the phone. And what I'm going to show you with Android is some other functionalities. Also a bit more, let's say, advanced and giving you a bit more freedom to test on. And after the app is installed, right? So we see that the app, same app, right? Same design, everything is the same. But because we are now on an Android phone, you can also execute and run ADB commands. And for those of you who do not know what that is, it's basically the ability to execute shell terminal commands on the phone, which gives you quite a lot of functionality and abilities to debug or to use, let's say, special functionalities built into the app only for testing or development purposes. So I have got two commands here, two ADB commands. The first one is to stop the app. So I open the ADB shell here on the right side by clicking on ADB. It will give me the same popover here. Copy paste in the command and just look at the background, and after executing it, the app is closed. Now I can do the reverse of it by starting the app again. So similar thing. Let's click on ADB, copy paste in the command, and run. Right. Now I said to remember the drawing one, and what I meant by that is this is the version 2.6, right? So what I'm going to do is to also switch app versions here on the right side. So by clicking on it, we will see, right, version 2.6 is the one which is active currently, the one I'm using. But this is also one of the cases Alistair mentioned, where we are trying to give you the ability to test and to where it's important basically for manual tester to also test things which are extremely or at least really complicated to achieve in automation, because the effort to do it is just not worth it. The time spent, the money spent on it, it's just not worth it. So what happens here is I've got an older version I started, and here by switching the app versions, I can switch to another version of the app, making sure that the bug I found is not a regression, for example, or I can compare different versions of the app, making sure that changes are as they are supposed to be and not. And because I'm lazy and typing in the username and password again, I'm just using a shortcut here, clicking on the text here in the bottom, which will automatically insert the username and password. And now when we click here on the top left, we will see, right, we have drawing here, which we didn't see in the beginning because the 2.6 app does not have it. Right. So having said that, and I think I might have, one or two last cool things to show you. And to do that, I need to find from the various functions here. Oh no, sorry. We are on an Android phone. Right. So again, I started the application on a real phone, but that doesn't mean I can only test on the application. I can still use the phone to do things like go to the web browser. Again, go to our demo website. There we go. Now we are on the website, and I can still continue to interact with it the same way I do, as if it were my phone in my hand. When we look at the right side, we have a lot more functionalities available to us to also increase the basically the coverage. So what we also always want to do in testing is making sure that my application, my website, my services is working as I intended, and I'm sure that changes won't break it. This is again coming back to digital confidence, the confidence that what I'm delivering to my end customers, to my end users, is what I expect it to be. That also includes, for example, things like being able to rotate a device. But now, when we also take a look at other roles and other users of our platform, we don't have just testers. We also have, of course, developers. And as a developer, I might not be super interested in doing the like a functional testing on the device because I am writing my unit tests. But what I'm interested in is if my application should fail, that I'm able to get log files out of it. And so we also have the ability to capture all the device logs. Here, in this case, because it's an Android phone, it would be the logcat device logs. In case of iOS, it would be the system logs. Having said that, we also offer then various other or more functionalities here on the right side for you to test on. Again, to just help you increase the coverage and also to support you in terms of exploratory testing, because this is the most value you get out of manual testing when you have a good chunk of automation and then you want to expand and do the basically do the top of the mountain. That also brings me to the end of the demo. So I see in the chat we have a couple of questions. So let me maybe, not sure, should I still continue to share my screen? Maybe that's useful for answering some of the questions for demonstration.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emin, and thanks, Alistair. That was quite a few wonderful insights you added on the topic, and on the same line, how Sauce Labs complement the subject we had for today. So on that note, let's move to questions, and if you can also navigate both of you so that you can pick the question you want to answer first. We can go in any order there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just looking. Maybe let's start knocking a few out. So Eamon, maybe a good place to start is, what is Source Connect Proxy?
Yes, good question. I didn't mention that, but imagine this. The usual use case for you as a user of Sauce Labs would be, I'm testing my application, I'm testing my website, but in a staging environment, in a testing stage environment. That means it's not publicly available. I, for example, cannot access it because I'm not in your corporate network. Source Connect Proxy is a small application you run internally, and it basically builds a secure tunnel between your testing environment and Sauce Labs, allowing our real devices, our emulators, our VMs to connect to the testing environment in your company to test on the testing environment.
Great. So then I'll maybe take the next question, which was from Sandeep, and I'm curious to know if digital confidence is something entirely new, or if it is something existing but forgotten in recent past while building testing apps. So Sandeep, digital confidence is what we're using to talk about what we think our clients are focusing on and what we're trying to help them do. It's obviously a pretty broad definition. Because it sits across so many different industries as well as types of applications and purposes. And then I saw you obviously asked a follow-up question, which is, what constitutes an ideal versus a practically achievable digital confidence? And does it really need to be connected to shifting left and shifting right? I think the answer to that question is it really depends on the type of business and type of applications you're trying to run. For instance, one of our customers is Khan Academy, or not one of our customers. We work with them because they're a non-profit, and we provide testing services to them. So for them, digital confidence is making sure that the offering is available in every country. They say it should be. They look at the different languages that are available and how well those are working. In other cases, if you're a commercial bank. Digital confidence for you would probably be first and foremost security, making sure your app secure, and then making sure that your customers can transact the types of transactions they are. So really, the digital confidence piece is dependent on the business and the outcomes that they're looking for. And then I think it's what's practically achievable becomes a conversation of where is the business currently in terms of testing, and where are we aiming to get to. And practically achievable is probably different at different points in time along that journey to where you are to where you want to be. So then Mukhtar asked, is it like on cloud, we are trying to access the device, as you said, sorry, so like on cloud, we're trying to access the. So I think the question, Yemen, is
so the devices are located in data centers. In Europe, we have one data center for real devices. In the US, we have multiple ones, and it is it's a real device you access using your browser or any other browser you want to. You could even do it probably on a phone, and think of it as a SaaS. It is a SaaS solution in the end. Yeah. Maybe I can take also the next one from Manish. We usually test on databases and backend part of most of the applications. Does Source Lab support the testing for backend jobs, etc.? Kind of. So usually in a mobile app architecture, what you do is your mobile application communicates with backend services using API calls. And because we acquired the company called API Fortress, we also now can offer our customers to test their APIs directly. The other way around would be to use basically an application, and then you have some APIs, and then you test the APIs using the UI of your app. Or you have build some solution or some kind of solution to mock the APIs, which is the preferred way actually to test the APIs working and to test the integration basically between your mobile app and your APIs, meaning you get a response back and you want to make sure that your application is behaving as you expected. And for both cases, meaning testing the API directly, but also testing your application with mocked APIs, API Fortress can support both use cases. But the testing of the database directly and things like that, that is out of scope for what Source Labs is offering.
So maybe we should, if you want to jump into the next one, which is, can the same device be accessed by multiple people at the same time, possibly to run two different apps on the same device at a time?
No. Because, I mean, access in terms of one is using it and the other one is looking, using the share button, yes, but it's not possible for two people to use the same real device at the same time because in the end, it's a real device and it would be something like you giving your phone to someone and then you both try to use the phone at the same time. It's just not going to work physically. But what you can do is you can install dependent apps. So when we look at my screen again, I don't have a dependent app, unfortunately, but I can basically here I have the buttons called install dependent app. So if my app is the app I want to test on, it depends on another app. I don't know, VPN apps or something like that. Then I can also install them in my manual testing session and test both apps, basically.
So then the next question, which had a couple of upvotes, is can custom APK applications be installed on mobile apps not available on the App Store?
Absolutely, yes. So that is actually our recommendation. So you shouldn't test apps which are already in the App Store, Play Store, and Test Flight, because that is already too late to some degree, because the app is now already in production. It is accessible by your end users, and if you find a bug there, the chances are high that your end users also have the bug. So yes, you can upload APK files, IPA files directly to Source Labs over the website or using a REST API or using a shell script, and then use them for manual testing as well as automation.
Great. So then where are the recordings stored? Can the same actions be recorded and run on multiple devices to save time for functional testers? I can maybe take this one. So the recordings are stored with a couple of different cloud providers in secure networks. Those are available to be downloaded and do with. So all the job assets, so after you do the recording, you can download the video if you want and share it with whomever. You can also just share a link to the actual session itself. So if you were working with developers, you could say, view this link, it'll have all the relevant information for them. And then in terms of recording and run multiple devices on the same time, we currently don't have a functionality to do that. It's something we're experimenting with and looking at. One of the tools we've been investigating is Selenium IDE to do some sort of record and playback functionality. There are some other companies that we do partner with that provide that sort of information, but I don't have a ton of detail on those. Eamon, do you know much about record and playback with partners?
No, only the Selenium ID you mentioned. But if you I didn't saw the name, but if you are referring, for example, if you can use your functional tests you have already written in whatever language you want to, Java, JavaScript, whatever, you can run all of these tests on multiple devices. So you can run parallelization on our platform. That's no problem. So you have one single test case, and you can run it on multiple devices, multiple VMs. So I'm not sure if which of these areas you were referring to in your questions, but yeah, in terms of recording, as Alistair said, yeah, we are experimenting. How safe is data if we want to functionality test secure or confidential websites? Safe, and because so there are two ways for you to connect to Source Labs. Actually, 3 ways, but the third option is not really a possibility because of security reasons. So the 2 ones are Source Connect Proxy, which I mentioned in the beginning. It will create a tunnel between your test environment, and Source Labs. It's a secure tunnel, so encrypted, password and credentials secured. The third option is using an IPsec VPN tunnel. What that basically means is you are going to marry the Source Labs network and the customer network, and you can access the each other's network, so to say, for testing purposes directly. So in the end, yeah, it's pretty safe. And if you're like afraid, for example, that some other users could use the tunnel or use some way to access your network, that's not possible. Because again, I mean, of course, if they had the access to your credentials, but then every other solution is the same in that regard. Is it possible to see the network traffic requests and responses while testing on these devices? Yes. So we are, as I said, we are capturing the all the device logs, and it also includes things like requests and responses. But I believe the question is more tailored to web, and for there the answer is yes as well. So you can capture requests and responses, which results in a HAR file, HRR file, which you can then read using Wireshark or similar tools. And yeah, you could also use the dev tools, so the developer dev tools on the browser itself when you're doing manual testing. The next question from the moderator: is there a way to compare the UI screenshots in one go across various devices? Yeah, kind of. I mean, if we take a step back and say we want to do visual testing, which we also can offer, which because we acquired a company called Screener.io, that is supported for web browsers, VMs, things like that. And if you want to do visual comparison on devices, this is something on our roadmap, I believe. Alistair, do you have more insights into that?
I don't have a ton of specifics. I know it's they're actively investigating and working on it. There's obviously some different challenges they have to overcome in order to deliver that sort of functionality for mobile apps. But I know they're investigating it, and I would expect we'd hear more probably over the course of the next few months.
Hello. Is this require programming skills more? Yes and no. You can be you can write a lot of test scripts and test code like a software developer would. So that means you would require some sort of programming skills, meaning Java, JavaScript, Python, things like that. But in the end, what Source Labs is doing is we are the platform where you run your tests on. How you create the tests, that is totally up to you. So you could use other tools which generate the test scripts for you. You could use tools like Cucumber Gherkin style, so behavior-driven development, where you use text to describe and define your test scripts. So yes, you can be quite writing a lot of test cases, code, but you don't need to. The next question from Manish: can we also do cross-border testing, for example, applications availability only from certain regions, or when we move the same device from one location, application accessible to another application unavailable? Yeah, this question touches on multiple topics. So when we talk about mobile application availability, usually that is handled per app store. So you can, for example, if you release or publish an app, you can say, okay, I want this app to be only accessible in the US, only in UK, or worldwide. This is tied to then the user's own Apple ID or Google account. So that means if the Apple ID you are using to download an application is tied to the US, and the application is only available in the US, then it will work. But for my example, I cannot see that app in the App Store because my Apple ID is tied to Germany. In terms of testing, for example, the different locations of the app, so meaning that the app is behaving correctly, showing the right information if you are in, in Germany versus in UK. Yes, you can do it with location injection, so similar to what I showed you in the demo. But if we are also testing about how the app behaves, if the if the location is determined not by the network or the GPS, rather it's determined by the IP address or things like that. So really the originating IP address with for that you would use or need an additional proxy to specifically for this use case. It's called Charles Proxy, which you can use in combination with Source Connect Proxy to really do location-based testing. So, for example, you then go to a UK website and it will show you the UK website, while when you go then to a German website, it will show you the German content. I hope that answers the question. The last question from Sandeep. What credible resources do you suggest to testers to learn more about thinking, design, development, and testing of digital confidence? Good question. Well, we have a wiki page, documentation on our wiki.sourcelabs.com. It has a lot of technical information about all of this. We have quite frequently blog posts on our website as well. We publish white papers to certain topics, blog posts. We're doing webinars like this one. And we are also present in events, conferences, and we have quite a lot of known people in the testing industry talking at such events. But if you really want to look at books or things like that, I unfortunately do not know any. I couldn't recommend any books to you. Maybe Alistair, if you have, yeah.
The one that jumps out to me that I think of in terms of books would be Measure What Matters by John Doerr. It's looking at OKRs. I think for me that relates to digital confidence by, if you understand what you're trying to achieve from a measurement point of view and a business goals point of view, then it becomes a lot easier to know if you're providing digital confidence. So I think this is where we get into almost like product thinking, where it's if I know what I'm looking for, which is engagement, users, returning users, revenue, and I'm measuring those things, then I will know I've got digital confidence when I'm not seeing fluctuations in those measures that's unexpected. So, we don't lose a day's worth of revenue because we had an outage, things like that. But there's a ton of books on tangential topics related to it.
That's awesome. Thanks. And from audience, if you have any further questions, you can post it now. This is the right time to ask them. Uh, while I was listening, right, I was having one question, Alistair and Yimin. So you tested right, like the right balance between testing things manually and the automation. And but usually when we talk about these topics, it pretty much settles on web, then on mobile, right? How do you see API testing fitting in this entire context? And this also has the angle of Sauce Labs recently acquiring API Fortress. So how developments are shaping in that direction, and what would be your thoughts on that?
I can take it. So my thoughts are, as APIs become more prevalent and a way that's becoming more common in use, I think it becomes critical to test them. I think what's really interesting is the speed at which you can test APIs and find any potential backend issues should be a lot quicker than through an app or a website. So I think in a world where no matter how much money you have, or not how much money, but every company has a finite limit on their resourcing. So even the Googles of the world have a certain amount of testing they can do. So I think when you then start looking and saying, okay, we could test that API through the UI as well, but we could do a million tests really quickly early in the development cycle, then I think it's about picking the right tools for the right context. So I mean, my thought is you would API test a lot early on, especially if you're making changes to it or making changes to underlying pieces that API touches. And then as you move through the development cycle, you might not test on that API as much.
Yeah, absolutely agree what Alistair has said. Maybe a short story from my experience when I worked as the engineer for mobile applications. Usually it's two different teams doing developing the APIs and developing the mobile applications, because you have a team which develops the APIs, the backend system, and you have then the team who is just using that stuff. So we already have the issue by saying, okay, we have a coupling here and the application is trying to use something, but now you have the integration between your app and the backend. So too much can go wrong. Your tests could fail. For whatever reason, because you have just too many variables in between. And that is also why it's important, as Alistair had said, we need to think about using the right tool for the right use case you have. And if you want to test the APIs directly, and that is always better than going the roundabout way by using some app, for example, to access the API, then you should do it. That means using, for example, tools like API Fortress to directly test the APIs itself, but then also in the app use mocking to mock the responses from the API, so you can make sure that there's no other factor which could result in the test failing, even though there's nothing wrong with the API.
Got it.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, perfectly. And my follow-up question was with API Fortress acquisition coming in, will there be provision wherein Sauce Labs user would be able to test through the Sauce Lab platform itself these APIs manually, and also they can plug in the automation? How that's going to be?
Yeah, so we've done the acquisition. Our plan is certainly to bring API Fortress into the Sauce Labs platform. That work is underway. It's pretty. There's obviously a significant amount of work to do in terms of creating a unified experience and making sure that we maintain our security and all those sorts of things. So that is certainly the intention, the direction we're going. It might just take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind the acquisition of API Fortress was announced less than 4 weeks ago, if I'm not wrong, or something like that. So it's really,
pretty
really
recent.
new. Yeah.
I think that would be great addition to what you have already shown. So fantastic. So thanks again. I think there are no more questions. Let me just quickly have a look at the YouTube and Facebook stream if there are any questions there. Yeah, I think we look good there. So yeah, that's pretty much on questions. So thanks again, Alistair and Eamon, for your time and sharing all the wonderful insights. Thank you everyone for joining on a Saturday evening. For everyone joining from India, and I see there are people from several places. So really thank for taking out time and being with us here. On that note, we'll sign off. I was having Josley, myself Mahesh, and I was having Josley, my co-host, helping me here. And yeah, thanks to our speakers again. So it was wonderful having you here, Alistair and Eamon. Thank you.
Sure. It's a pleasure. Thank you.